Tonight on Bridge City News, emergency responders will be joining forces for a memorial stair climb this weekend, honoring those firefighters and police officers who lost their lives on September the 11th. The Lethbridge Police are needing our help with crisis support. We will explain how. And federal candidates' forums are coming up in our region. We will tell you where and when they are.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening, thanks so much for joining us. The Lethbridge Fire Department and EMS unit are looking for people to sign up for the 9th annual 9/11 stair climb. The event is held to remember the 343 firefighters and 70 law enforcement officers who died tragically at the World Trade Center on September the 11th of 2001. Ainsley O'Reilly reports on just how meaningful the event is for our local firefighters.
It is the big thing. The biggest thing is that they did save lives. They saved copious amounts of lives. But what the fallout from the whole thing is in all these years that have passed since, we can't forget that. And we also can't forget the fact that of all the lives that they've changed in a profound way.
After September 11th, 01, so much changed. When everyone was running out, first responders were running into the chaos to save lives. This Sunday, here in Lethbridge, everyone is encouraged to participate in a fundraiser which remembers those brave men and women.
But we'll be climbing the Melcor Tower downtown. That's the old Lethbridge Tower. We're going to do an equivalent of 110 stories, and that's the same distance as the World Trade Center as it stood before the attacks on 9/11.
You start doing the tower and you think, man, this is hard. And then you start thinking, these guys did it. 343 of them did it. 70 police officers did it. Copious amounts of paramedics did it also. And they did it without hesitation.
Registration closes Thursday, and you can sign up at raceroster.com.
The event is just $40 to register, and all of the proceeds go to Legacy Place Society, an Alberta-based charity that assists first responders, military members, and their families. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Are you interested in becoming a crisis support worker? Victim Services Unit is now recruiting volunteers and will be hosting an information session later this evening. Volunteers crisis support workers are first responders who provide support during the first few critical hours after a crime or a tragedy.
We're very fortunate with this police service because they call us out on mostly all the major incidents. So any major crime, assaults, sexual assaults, our #1 calls for service is domestic violence. All domestic violence files where charges are laid, they must call us. So we go out with the police to support the victim at that time. Our second calls for service is notification of next of kin and sudden deaths. And that's why we want to support the families, give them the information about the medical examiner or just some support systems in the community. And then after that, all sexual assaults, robberies, then we can support those individuals because I can't imagine them doing it on their own. So that's why this is such a critical program to our community, and we're out there supporting victims of crime.
The information session will take place 7 o'clock tonight at the Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization. For more information about becoming a volunteer, you can call Darcy James at 403-330-5023. They are small, ill-tempered, hungry, and if given the chance, they could play a much larger role in preventing deadly wildfires. A goat grazing project has been developed by the City of Lethbridge. The goal is to minimize the amount of highly flammable grassland areas within the city limits.
In 2017, we had a wildfire management plan conceived for us through a consultant, and he identified all along basically Scenic Drive as one of the major sources for grass fires in the coulees. So we're going to basically cover that area on the top behind the houses, the grass that leads right up to the house. We're going to try to get that back at least 100 feet, 30 meters, so we can make sure that the fire doesn't come up to houses for grass fires. So.
Well, this time of year, I mean, they sure like shrubs and brush more than they like the grass. So you kind of got to hold them on the grass longer, but it's not hard to put them on the brush. So it's just a matter of they're eating and moving all the time. So as you go across it, you might have to go across the same area 8-10 times instead of holding them on it, because they're a herd animal and they'll keep moving and eating as they're walking. So you'll go for a ways, turn around and come back, and you'll keep crossing back and forth. All the neighbors have been excited. They've come out and met us, and John's our herder, and they bring him out coffee, and they've just loved. Everyone's excited that we're doing a project trying to help save their homes.
A $20,000 grant from Forest Resources Improvement Association of Alberta will be used to fund the project, which is now underway. The 30th Annual Children's Wish Giant Pumpkin Festival will be taking place at Greenhaven Garden Centre this Saturday. From 10 till 3, you and your family are invited to participate in this fun fundraiser. 100% of the proceeds will be going to the Children's Wish Foundation of Southern Alberta. The cost is just $5 for each child's wristband.
There's games and there's like bouncy castles, the big obstacle jump, and then there's a little bit smaller one for the younger ones. They can just go in there safe, and there's lots of little games that they can play. And we have 2 other blow-up games. One's a baseball game and one's a basketball game. Those are lots of fun. And then they have the petting zoo, and there's wagon rides, and there's pumpkins to decorate, and there's face painting, and there's some balloon people will come and make the little special balloon animals and things like that. The petting zoo is a big draw because they don't always see those little animals, and the horse-drawn wagon rides. Those are a huge hit. So they get to go on a wagon, get pulled around with the great big Clydesdale or Percheron horses. So it's just fun.
Pumpkins will also be available for purchase by donation. Students from both GS Lakey and Chinook High School are going on field trips of a lifetime. They're headed to Eastern Europe, New York City, and Music City, USA, Nashville, Tennessee, beginning next year.
There's 2 tremendous opportunities for Chinook students coming up in Easter 2021. The first is a trip through Eastern Europe, and the second is a theater trip to New York City. There's a tremendous opportunity for students to experience live professional theater. That's the best in the world. We'll be seeing 3 Broadway shows. We'll be doing backstage tours of some of the plays, and we'll even spend an afternoon doing a workshop with a local actor. So they will cover a lot of the drama curriculum.
We're going down there to perform, so we're going to have a chance to perform at Graceland and at the Grand Ole Opry. So the idea of getting self-discipline and work ethic, they're going to have to really practice a lot to get good on their instruments, to get it to a quality that's good to be performing in Nashville.
It's a great opportunity for them to visit this music city, as it has an opportunity for them to experience what music production and performance is in the big city. Nashville is a great hub for all great musicians, not just country music, but for concert bands, to jazz bands, to pop music, everything there. It's a musical hub.
Students from each school will be flying out next April and in the spring of 2021. The Helen Schuler Nature Center just received the largest personal donation in its 37-year history. The group received $20,000 for its outdoor learning classroom and amphitheater project. The donation will be used to replace the worn-out amphitheater. The new outdoor classroom will enhance the Nature Center experience for schools, families, and tourists. Since 2018, the Outdoor Classroom Project has received more than $244,000 in contributions. There has been a big spike in booze thefts. Now that's according to a recent report by the Alberta Liquor Store Association. It says there have been 5,000 liquor store robberies in Edmonton so far this year alone. That is a 300% increase over last year. The association says it has been told by police that gangs are behind most of the robberies. A former medical student who was convicted in 2018 of raping an unconscious woman at a Calgary house party in 2014 has been denied bail. Prachur Shrivastava received his 45-month prison sentence on August 28th of this year. His defense lawyer originally asked the judge to send his 27-year-old client to jail for only 9 months. A couple of Calgary City councillors want police to review a decision to shut down the Victoria Park Police Station. The councillors say a police station is desperately needed in the inner city. Jeremy Farkas says the area has seen a big rise in mental health and addictions problems since a safe injection site opened around the same time the Victoria Park Station closed. Police say they're using a mobile command center to cover the area for now. City Council is hoping they will get some answers from city administrators later this fall. A convoy including as many as 200 logging trucks made a 300-kilometer trek from Merritt, BC to Vancouver earlier today to draw attention to the impact of dozens of mill closures. The shutdowns have resulted in thousands of layoffs in BC's forestry industry. The convoy is headed for the site of the Union of BC Municipalities Convention. The federal election is coming up October 21st, and candidates across the country are out campaigning right now. The safe consumption site in Lethbridge has been a hot-button topic so far. Now, there are federal candidates forums coming up that will allow you to ask your local candidate questions on issues you're most concerned about. The first event will be held tonight, 7 till 9 o'clock at the Picture Butte Senior Center. SACPA will be running a forum October 2nd at the U of L's new BMO Theatre, also from 7 till 9. You can join me at the Lethbridge Public Library Forum October 3rd from 7 till 9 o'clock again, and again at the Yates Theatre October 7th for the event hosted by the Lethbridge Chamber. The Coaldale Chamber of Commerce is also expected to host a forum early next month. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he will not discuss details of a conversation he had with Justin Trudeau about the Liberal leader's history of wearing brown and blackface. Now, he did say, however, that he will speak up for Canadians who were hurt by Trudeau's actions.
So Mr. Trudeau did call me. We did have a chat. And I said that I wanted to keep the conversation private because I didn't want to be used as a tool in his exoneration. But I also want to make it clear, it doesn't matter if he tells me anything, really, right? Because I'm not a proxy for the people of Canada. The people of Canada that were hurt, they need to know that he understands. The people that were in Canada that feel like he doesn't see the struggles that they go through, that he ignores those struggles, and his policy decisions ignore those struggles, they need to know that he cares.
One of our political contributors, Brian Lilly, says the Trudeau blackface scandal, according to the recent polls, did hurt the Liberals and help the other parties.
The Conservatives are up 2 points from 35 to 37. The Liberals are down 2 points from 32 to 30. So that's a 7-point spread nationally. In Ontario, the Liberals dropped 6 points. The Conservatives went up, I think, by 2. The NDP also went up by 2. So the NDP's at 18 points, the Liberals are at 34, and the Conservatives are at about 36, 37.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Lilly, also discussing the tax cut promises the federal party leaders are making. That's coming up in the second half of our show. Justin Trudeau says a re-elected Liberal government would introduce an interest-free loan of up to $40,000 for homeowners who want to make their buildings more energy efficient.
Now people will be able to replace those leaky windows with that old furnace, not only making their home more comfortable and lowering their monthly bills, but also keeping our environment healthy. It's a win-win.
Trudeau also said the Liberals would invest $100 million in skills training for the construction of new net zero homes. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer, meanwhile, highlighted a home renovation credit during a recent stop in Quebec. Scheer says it will mean people who invest in energy-saving home renovations will save money.
As Prime Minister, I will establish the Green Homes Tax Credit that will allow you to lower your home's emissions through green renovations. This 2-year program will encourage Canadians to renovate their homes with emission-reducing technologies. With our plan, you will be eligible to receive a 20% refundable credit on your income tax for green improvements to your homes of over $1,000 and up to $20,000.
Green Party leader Elizabeth May released a detailed spending breakdown, which includes a promise to balance the budget by the year 2024. There have been more impeachment calls against U.S. President Donald Trump. The House has now launched a Trump impeachment inquiry. It all stems from a phone call involving the Ukrainian president, where it is alleged that Trump wanted to reopen an investigation of his potential 2020 rival Joe Biden and his son in exchange for $250 million in military aid for Ukraine. Democrats say Trump apparently asked the Ukrainian leader to work with his lawyer Rudy Giuliani and the Attorney General William Barr on the issue. Giuliani says the phone call is really no big deal.
This whole thing began with an allegation that the president said to the president of the Ukraine, I'm not going to give you a $250 in military aid unless you investigate Joe Biden. When you read the conversation, there's no mention of $250 million.
You read it?
There's no mention of military aid. There's no quid pro quo.
This is the transcript?
Quote the president of the Ukraine. The only one who's significant here. If anybody was pressured, the only one who could be pressured is the president of the Ukraine, not Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler.
So can I just back up?
The president of the Ukraine says, I wasn't pressured. End of case.
I know.
Over.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask you, did you read the transcript?
Let's say it was read to me.
U.S. President Trump says the impeachment inquiry is the worst witch hunt in political history.
Look, it's just a continuation of the witch hunt. It's the worst witch hunt in political history. We have the strongest economy we've ever had. We have the best unemployment numbers we've ever had. African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, lowest in history, best numbers we've ever had. Our country is doing phenomenally well. We have rebuilt our military to the tune of $2.5 trillion. We have the strongest military on earth. If you look at the vets, if you look at any group, they're doing fantastically well.
Across the pond, British lawmakers returned to the House of Commons today following the suspension by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson that was deemed illegal by the Supreme Court.
Colleagues, welcome back to our place of work. The UK Supreme Court ruled yesterday that Parliament has not been prorogued and that the Speaker of the House of Commons and the Lord Speaker can take immediate steps to enable each House to meet as soon as possible to decide upon a way forward. I will arrange for the citation for that judgment to be entered in the journal of this House and accordingly direct that the item relating to the prorogation of Parliament in the journal of Monday, 9th September is expunged.
Closer to home, Toronto Maple Leaf star Austin Matthews says he regrets being a distraction to his team. Matthews is facing a charge of disorderly conduct and disruptive behavior following an incident in his hometown of Scottsdale, Arizona.
Regret, any of my actions that would ever, put a distraction on the team or distress any individual. I take a lot of pride in, preparing myself for the season and, representing the Toronto Maple Leafs as well as I can. So, unfortunately, due to the situation, I'm afraid I can't really make any other comments. But that's all I have. And thank you guys for coming out.
Now, here's something you don't see very often. Authorities in Ohio released a video they say shows an inmate collecting contraband, including a cell phone and marijuana, being dropped by a drone over a county jail's outdoor exercise yard. The county sheriff has launched an investigation. That is very creative. The Canadian Country Music Association has named the Cavendish Beach Music Festival in Prince Edward Island as the country's best country festival, fair, or exhibition. It beat out other events, including the Calgary Stampede, for the second year in a row. Organizers say 75% of those who attended this year's event in July came from outside of Prince Edward Island, and that the festival generated about $10 million towards the local economy. I took in the Cavendish Beach Festival at PEI a number of years ago. Spectacular scenery, a lot of fun, and very friendly people. We had showers off and on again in many parts of southwestern Alberta today. Will that trend continue? Complete weather details are coming up. We had kind of a mixed bag today. Clouds, sunshine, and light showers in some areas. Tonight, mainly cloudy with a chance of showers developing and a low near 9. Tomorrow, rain off and on with a high expected near 15. Friday, overcast with the mercury dropping to 7. A chance of snow developing on Saturday with a high of only +2. Rain mixed with snow on Sunday and a high of 4. Monday, a chance of flurries developing again with a high near 6 degrees. The clouds should clear out on Tuesday with a balmy high of 13 expected. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 18 degrees and an average low of 4. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 2001 at 33 degrees, and the record low was -9 in 1972. Sunrise was at 7:21, sunset at 7:25. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up now. Expect rain in 18 in Victoria, showers in 16 for Vancouver. Thunder showers in 6 degrees is on tap for Calgary on Thursday. Rain and 11 for Edmonton. Cloud showers and 11 as well for both Regina and Saskatoon. Rain and 15 is on tap for Winnipeg. Overcast and 20 degrees for Toronto. Showers and 18 for Ottawa. Expect lots of rain and 18 as well for Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have clouds and a high of 21. Clearing and 21 degrees as well for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Just a few clouds and 17 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect rain and a high near 12 degrees on Thursday. Another Alberta county has declared an agriculture disaster. Leduc County, south of Edmonton, says the growing season has been so wet that producers cannot get into their fields. Last month, Lac St. Anne County, northwest of Edmonton, declared a state of agricultural disaster due to the flooding. The county said the soggy soil damaged crops, and the small amount of feed that has been harvested is now in rough shape. It is not clear how the province will respond to the disaster designations. E-cigarette maker Juul is shutting down all of its advertising and ending lobbying efforts in the United States as safety concerns over vaping intensify. The company says its CEO is stepping down and will be replaced by a senior executive from Altria, which is the maker of Marlboro. Altria took a 35% stake in Juul last December at a cost of $13 billion. As the United Auto Workers strike against GM continues into its second week, it is not just the company and workers who are feeling the pinch. Dealers are beginning to run short of parts to repair cars, trucks, and SUVs. The companies that make auto parts are starting to see work slow down as well. Canadian parts supplier Magna International is reporting temporary layoffs at some of its U.S. and Canadian operations. One analyst says General Motors is losing $100 million in profits per day and was forced to temporarily close in Oshawa, Ontario. Affected GM workers in Canada will receive full pay under contract provisions. The CEO of eBay is stepping down as the online retailer attempts to sell or spin off some of its major assets. CFO Scott Schenkel will become the interim chief executive as the company seeks a permanent replacement for Devin Wenig. Last March, eBay said it was considering the sale of its ticket reselling StubHub and its classified ads business after a push from activist investor Elliott Management. The review is ongoing, and the company said it will provide an update on those efforts later this fall. Shares of Nike rose 5.6% today, which beat analysts' expectations. It says revenue in its first quarter was up 7% to $10.7 billion. Much of that was driven by growth around the world. Diluted earnings per share for the quarter were 86 cents, which was an increase of 28%. Most of that was primarily due to strong revenue growth and gross margin expansion. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 14 points on the day to 16,784. The Dow was up 162 points to 26,970. The Nasdaq was up 83 points to 8,077. And the S&P 500 was up 18 to 2,984. Oil was down 79 cents per barrel on the day to $56.50. Natural gas was up a cent to $2.51. Gold was down 28.36 to $15.03 per ounce, and silver was down 71 cents an ounce to $17.90. Wheat is at $205 per metric ton, barley at $200, canola is at $4.48, and corn is at $277 per metric ton. Live cattle is up 88 cents to $103.25. Feeder cattle is up 33 cents to $141.65, and lean hogs up $2.58 to $65. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 75.38 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a few All Candidates Forums are coming up in our region. The first event will be held tonight 7 till 9 at the Picture Butte Senior Centre. SACPA will be running a forum October 2nd at the U of L's new BMO Theatre, also from 7 to 9. You can join me at the Lethbridge Public Library October 3rd from 7 till 9, and again at the Yates Theatre October 7th for the event hosted by the Lethbridge Chamber. The Coaldale Chamber of Commerce is also expected to host a forum early next month. The Trudeau Liberals have taken a bit of a hit at the polls over the Trudeau blackface scandal. Now, one of our regular political contributors, Brian Lilly, has details next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Christian recording artist Steve Bell is performing in concert September 28th at First Baptist Church in Lethbridge, beginning at 7:30 p.m. Enjoy a night of stories and music, featuring old favorites and new songs from his latest album, Where the Good Way Lies. For tickets, visit stevebell.com or call 1-800-854-3499. Southern Alberta Crime Stoppers is holding their first ever 5K Color Fun Run on Saturday, October 19th from 9 to 11 a.m. at Legacy Regional Park in Lethbridge. All proceeds to go to Southern Alberta Crime Stoppers. For more information about the run and volunteer opportunities, email lcsa1983@gmail.com or visit Southern Alberta Crime Stoppers Facebook page. Easy Does It is an Al-Anon support group for adult children of alcoholics. Get an opportunity to share about your experiences with those who understand and learn healthy coping skills for your relationships. This group meets Thursdays at 7 p.m. at the Church of the Good Shepherd. For details, call Judy at 403-329-0661. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Trudeau blackface, it just doesn't seem to be going away. Many media outlets around the world are still talking about it and whether or not Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is racist. Political contributor Brian Lilly has been following this story, and you followed Mr. Trudeau as well, Brian. I can't believe Justin Trudeau is a racist. But what is the Liberal leader saying now? I know he's apologized.
Well, you know, he and his supporters want to say, look, I'm not a racist. Okay, but you committed racist acts at least 3 times. And when asked, are there more? He says, well, I don't want to be definitive. When he's asked, have you dressed in blackface since 2001? he dodges the question. And when asked specifically about that video that Global News obtained, the one that looks like he's in total blackface, he's got on a an afro type wig, total blackface on his face, his arms, his hands, even on his knees that you can see through his ripped jeans. He's also wearing a t-shirt with bananas on it, and it looks like something shoved down the front of his pants, a large object of some kind. When he was asked specifically, what was that costume? Justin Trudeau said, "I've been open with Canadians, and I'll continue to be open with Canadians." When the reporter said, "With respect, Prime Minister, that's not what I asked you. I asked what the costume was," he said, "I've been open with Canadians, and I'll continue to be open with Canadians." Hal, I actually did something that I've never done. I laughed out loud at a politician giving what he thought was a serious answer.
Wow. Now, you've been involved with some polling that's been done recently specifically on this blackface case. And while you found the Canadian public is ready to cut Mr. Trudeau some slack, there's been a little bit of drop for the grits in several polls.
Yeah, so I've been doing polling with John Wright from DART. He used to be with Ipsos. He learned under Angus Reid. So, a guy who has been in the polling business for more than 30 years on his own and, learned from the grandfather of the polling business in Canada, Angus Reid. John Wright went, we had asked him some questions, and I think we talked about this previously. We asked about, women, do you believe when Justin Trudeau says he's a feminist? And only 24% of Canadian women believe he's a feminist. But we asked that question before blackface. And after blackface happened, I said, John, you've got to ask, what do Canadians think about blackface? Well, only 45% think he's a hypocrite on this. 55% say no. 76% say it's a long time ago. About 66% say we'll cut him some slack. So the Canadian public is kind of looking at this and going, nah, whatever. We're not overly bothered by it. I think they're fairly cynical about politicians. But then when you ask, who will you vote for? The latest numbers from DART compared to the poll that we did with them on September 11th, the day the election was called, we were in the field. So the election was called in the morning. We were in the field that afternoon and evening asking people, who would you vote for if an election was happening today? The Conservatives are up 2 points from 35 to 37. The Liberals are down 2 points from 32 to 30. So that's a 7-point spread nationally. In Ontario, the Liberals dropped 6 points. The Conservatives went up, I think, by 2. The NDP also went up by 2. So the NDP's at 18 points, the Liberals are at 34, and the Conservatives are at about 36, 37, in that range. These are getting close to majority numbers for Andrew Scheer when you look at the totality, the regional breakdowns, the national numbers. He's not quite there yet, but that's the trend line. Since that came out, I want to point out that Angus Reid and Ipsos have also come out with polls that show similar numbers. Campaign Research had similar numbers on the weekend, showing that there is a lead in Ontario, because I know out west, every time I talk to people out west, Hal, they keep saying, what's wrong with you folks in Ontario? Can't you see? Well, numbers are changing, things are fluid, and, while people are saying they're willing to cut Trudeau some slack, they may not be as willing to vote for him.
Now, in an attempt to divert attention away from blackface, the Liberals put out some pretty big policy proposals here, Brian. Some include helping to lower cell phone bills and a gun ban. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, and the problem with them for the Liberals is that they're putting out these big, bold policy announcements to change the channel from blackface. They don't want me talking to you about blackface. They don't want you talking over the fence to your neighbor. What was the character's name in Tim Allen's show, Tool Time or whatever? They don't want you talking over the fence to your neighbors about blackface. They want you talking about policy. Justin Trudeau's going to ban military-style assault weapons. Okay, what's a military-style assault weapon? You've only listed the AR-15. Well, rifles like that. Well, which rifles? We'll get back to you. Okay, so you're going to lower cell phone bills. How? Well, we'll talk to the telecom operators. All right, well, you can talk to them, but that doesn't necessarily lower the bills. How will you actually do it? We'll get back to you. We'll bring in national pharmacare. Well, what does that actually mean? Does it mean that if I have a drug coverage plan under my employer that it gets replaced by a government plan? We'll get back to you. everything is "we'll get back to you." I'm a little bit shocked because I've covered, I can't tell you how many elections federally and provincially at this point. And I've never had so many times where there's no details there. The Conservatives and the NDP are putting forward their proposals and releasing costing by the parliamentary budget officer as they do it. And so people can pick it apart. I know more details about Jagmeet Singh and the NDP's National Pharmacare plan and his dental plan than I know about Justin Trudeau's. I wasn't at Jagmeet Singh's, but I was at Justin Trudeau's when he was in Hamilton the other day. So he's trying to change the channel, but he won't give us any detail. Even in Burnaby, just yesterday, he's talking about his climate plan. Okay, how will you get to net zero? We'll get back to you. It reminds me of that long forgotten movie from the 80s about last night. Rob Lowe asking all the questions, and John Belushi just says, at this point, we don't know.
Now, a story we recently had on BCN was that the Monk debate on foreign policy was cancelled because Justin Trudeau is simply not participating. How many debates will he actually be participating in, Brian?
He'll be participating in 3. And you might say, well, wait a minute. No, he's only doing 1, right? He's doing the one in English. He's doing the official government-sanctioned debate by the Leaders' Debate Commission that his government set up. So he's doing that one in English, and he's doing that one in French. Okay, yes, but he also said that he would do the TVA debate, which in, TVA, Hal, we used to work with a company affiliated with TVA. They are the most popular broadcaster in Quebec. They are the most popular French language broadcaster across the country. And so just like Maclean's and City TV said, we want to host a debate, and they did, as they did in 2015, TVA put that forward. Justin Trudeau turned down Maclean's and City TV. He didn't show up, and they had an empty podium there for him, and the other leaders showed up. Monk said that they were going to go ahead with or without him, and then that they would have an empty chair or an empty podium. They announced, I guess it was overnight, Monday into Tuesday, that wasn't going to be the case. They were going to cancel. I guess there wasn't enough interest without Trudeau there. But he's doing 2 debates in French and 1 in English. That boggles the mind. And his argument was, well, these aren't the official debates, and I will only do the official debates. But then he accepted TVA. And as Elizabeth May said to me a couple of weeks ago when I talked to her about this, she said she was really bothered by that because TVA will not invite her. They will not put her on the stage. And she said, Brian, in 2015, Justin Trudeau not only said I should be in the debates as the Green Party leader, but because I was the only woman and he wanted his daughters to see a woman on stage, yet he accepted the TVA debate. So he blew it when, in terms of official versus non-official. He blew it in terms of whether the Green Party leader, the only female candidate, would be accepted.
Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer continues to make policy promises almost as though, Brian, blackface didn't even happen. Is that his strategy? Let's move on.
Yeah, it kind of is. He will take shots. If he's asked about Justin Trudeau and blackface, he will take shots at him, just like the NDP leader Jagmeet Singh will. They will answer that. But both of them are kind of carrying on as if, okay, well, that's over there. Oh, okay, blackface, yeah, over there. We'll acknowledge it exists, but we're going to keep talking about our policies. And it's kind of a smart move for both leaders because, as our polling showed, Canadians are kind of shrugging their shoulders over this. They don't know what to make of it, and they say it's a long time ago. So, all right, what do you do in that case? You keep making your policy proposals, and when asked, you criticize the other guy. So it's a smart move from both parties. I'm sure the Green Party leader, Elizabeth May, People's Party leader, Maxime Bernier, are doing that, but none of them are threatening to form government. They're not even close. But the NDP and the Conservatives, they're moving forward. And so Scheer's making policy proposal after policy proposal, and he's aiming at one key demographic: suburban women, mothers who are looking after the family budget and saying, we're going to help you get ahead.
The NDP is trying to break through, but apparently, Brian, they're not having much luck, even with the blackface scandal. Didn't that help Jagmeet Singh at all?
Well, I think it does in terms of people saying, I'm willing to give him some credit, but we haven't seen a huge movement in terms of national poll numbers. Now, I will point out that DART poll that I mentioned earlier showed that in Ontario, the NDP moved up 2 points. So that's good for them because, Ontario, British Columbia, that tends to be their heartland. It used to be Saskatchewan. They had one MP, or I guess a couple of MPs there in the last election. They had one in Alberta. They're going to lose a number of those in this election. So they've got to keep Alberta. They've got to keep British Columbia. So that move up has got to do something. Look, I've been highly critical of Jagmeet Singh since he won the NDP leadership. He was this young, charismatic guy. He was going to be the NDP antidote to Justin Trudeau. He was very interesting on so many fronts. And then he won the NDP leadership and kind of fell flat until the day the election kicked off. And I've been saying this from the beginning, that on September 11th forward, he has done well. And then a week later, when blackface broke, he has given honest, heartfelt answers. But, as I was just mentioning, he's focused on policy and he's staying on policy. That's a good thing for him. It's a good thing for his party. And, maybe it will show up in the polls a little while from now. I don't know that we've seen the end of blackface having its impact on the polls. And liberals that I'm talking to, Hal, they say their biggest worry isn't that a drop in the polls. It's that people don't show up on voting day. And if they don't show up, that helps the NDP and that helps the Conservatives.
Now, one of the ideas the NDP is also bringing up is a veto to Quebec, offering them a veto when it comes to pipelines. That could potentially hurt our energy sector even more, Brian.
It really could. And, Jagmeet Singh initially announced it as a veto for Quebec and then asked about it, made it sound like it was a veto for any province that didn't want a pipeline, which was kind of like taking the Constitution and putting it through one of those home shredders you put over a garbage can and just saying, oh, yeah, we don't care about federal jurisdiction. We're not worried about it at all. He was asked about it subsequently and said, oh, no, that's not what I meant. And yet that's what it sounded like. But then he said, well, it's for Quebec because Quebec's different. That's not going to win him votes elsewhere. That may win him some votes, help save him some seats in Quebec, but giving Quebec special powers that the rest of the country doesn't hold never wins you support elsewhere in the country.
Now, the BC government won a court injunction of the turn off the tap laws. Can you explain?
Yeah, so, an appeals court said that this was unconstitutional, that you couldn't go forward. So it's a temporary injunction. It's not a full ruling. It will continue to go forward. But, this goes back to what I told you a while ago, Hal. Remember Bill Morneau, who's now my MP, living in downtown Toronto. Bill Morneau, the guy who stood up and said Trans Mountain's going to be built. We'll get shovels in the ground this year. All of that. That was in May of 2018. And we still don't have shovels in the ground. We still don't have construction. And earlier this year, I told you the only people making money off this would be lawyers. Well, lawyers are still making money because BC challenged Alberta's turn off the tap laws. So it's going to go back and forth. This is one court ruling. It's a temporary injunction, but it just shows that this is an issue that's going to be litigated on all fronts until somebody finally comes in and says enough is enough. We're going to move forward. We have to move forward and perhaps invokes some federal powers that maybe we haven't seen. I don't know if it's the notwithstanding clause. I don't know what it is, but we need to actually be able to move forward on this because it's ridiculous, the level of litigation that we have over a simple pipeline project. And I want to point out that Justin Trudeau flew to Burnaby. He flew across the country to make his climate change announcement in Burnaby in Jagmeet Singh's riding to say that he would, go to net zero emissions by 2050. And the NDP's response was a simple news release that said, you bought a pipeline. So, there's hypocrisy on all sides and litigation on all sides. And I really feel for the people that are trying to make a living off the oil patch right now.
And the fun has just begun with the campaigning here. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
In a world that is more populated and crowded than ever before, it seems that more and more people are experiencing isolation and loneliness. Joining me now via Skype from Hamilton, Ontario is Ray Pennings, the Executive VP of the Christian think tank Cardis. Ray, welcome back to BCN.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Ray, Cardis conducted a survey in partnership with the Angus Reid Institute, and it discovered that 23% of Canadians suffer from extreme social isolation and loneliness. Now, that's close to 1 out of every 4 people. Did those numbers kind of surprise you?
Not really. The trend has been studied for a few years. The problem in Great Britain is such that they actually created a cabinet position, a minister for loneliness. And certainly within Canada, there have been various aspects of loneliness, particularly among seniors in various groups that have been studied. So our motive in commissioning this survey was very much trying to get a more comprehensive look at the extent of the problem. And certainly we found it's very real and serious here in Canada as well.
Ray, let's get a little more specific about the survey itself. Individuals were put into 5 different categories. Tell me more about that.
So essentially we measured 2 things. We measured loneliness and we measured isolation. So isolation is a measurement of how many people you interact with. So outside of the people you live with in your household, how often you talk to your neighbor? How often do you go to the theater? How often do you go to the library? Loneliness is your emotional feelings regarding a desiring to talk to others. So, for example, if you had a financial need, do you have someone that you'd be able to turn to lend you a small amount of money? Ironically, 1 in 3 Canadians don't. If you were to receive an emotional news, a call from the doctor regarding a diagnosis, do you know who you would call to talk to? 1 in 5 Canadians don't. And then what we did is we put together those who were both isolated and lonely on the one extreme, and those who were neither on the other, and then all of the different permutations with the average, of course, in the middle. And you get roughly 5 categories of Canadians. And then we started to look at the different characteristics of each of those groups.
Now, can you define what is meant by extreme isolation and loneliness?
So extreme isolation and loneliness are those people who are in both categories. They are both lonely and they are isolated. So these are the people who generally, what's interesting is there is no single characteristic which puts you into the group. You can be earning $100,000 and be in any of these 5 groups. You can be poor and be earning in any of these 5 groups. That said, those who were most likely to be on the negative side of the spectrum were younger Canadians. So there is a sense. Now they tend to skew towards the feelings of loneliness. They have more contacts. They're a little less isolated, but they are feeling lonely. Whereas on the other side of it, older Canadians have less contacts, those 55 plus, but are more likely to be content and not having the cravings for the sort of contacts that they wish. But those who are on the extreme side have both and are in the most trouble.
So when it comes to maybe, let's say, millennials, is part of what's causing the isolation tied in with social media? People are spending a lot of time on Twitter, Instagram, as opposed to personal one-on-one interactions?
Our poll doesn't get far enough in terms of making the diagnosis. We can look at correlations. So, we highlighted on the negative side. What's interesting is on the positive side. Sometimes you can learn in terms of those who don't have it, what's unique about them. And there were 2 things that stood out, family and faith. They were hugely overrepresented in terms of being married with kids, and they were hugely overrepresented in terms of participating and regularly attending a community of worship. So on the positive side, those things are much less, to make you much less likely to be socially isolated.
And the negative side, maybe it is some of that social media as opposed to one-on-one interaction. Now, is it one particular age group, as I mentioned, the millennials, or is it widespread? Maybe seniors as well are feeling a lot of loneliness.
It is, every group is in every category. So, while there are more of one than the other, there are no single factors that are identified as here is the, whether social media, as you mentioned, poverty, education. You can make distinctions and to say the more educated you are, the more likely you are to be here or there. But there are people with PhDs on the negative side of the spectrum as well.
Now, when someone suffers from loneliness, how does that really impact their lives? Do we see a lot more cases of depression, anxiety?
So obviously there are the mental health aspects of this, but there are very practical things. For example, I mentioned the fact of if you came into a financial crisis, do you know somebody who could loan you some money? 1 out of 3 don't. Well, maybe payday loans, that whole industry and some of the negative sides of that. Maybe that, this has something to do with loneliness as well. So there are a host of social impacts. Certainly there's significant impacts in the health system as well. Significant mental health costs associated with this.
It's interesting how you made mention earlier that some Canadians don't even know their neighbors. I just bought a house recently here in Lethbridge, and the first thing I did the first couple of days, I went in, I was chatting with my neighbors, shaking their hands, and they said, you know what? The other neighbor that lived there for so many years, we didn't even get to know them. We didn't know their name. We didn't know anything about them. So what's stopping us from reaching out and getting to know our neighbors? Is it fear? Are we too busy?
It's interesting. 45% of Canadians have not spoken to their neighbor in the last month. So
not even to borrow a lawnmower?
I have no idea. There was no need for them apparently to talk to their neighbors, and yet we are having these widespread issues of loneliness. So it is interesting. You're in Lethbridge, a community that's surrounded by a more rural network, and there is some difference between rural and urban on this. I think some of the geography in terms of a lot of our suburbs where we have our garage doors, we drive inside with our door opener, you perhaps wave, but you don't talk to your neighbor. You don't have porches that are big enough to sit on. So we live isolated lives in which we all exist with our own families, and a lot of the interaction that we need to really be human is missing from our lives.
So let's talk more about those social institutions which really help protect against isolation and loneliness. Like you mentioned earlier, family and faith. How important are they?
Well, they're very important. It's interesting when we ask the people who are lonely and what is it that you crave, the numbers were off the charts. In the 90% where I wish I had more time with family. That was overwhelming, the result. And we can take a look at the history of the family unit, divorce, family breakdown, all of these factors that really, we're a generation in now of a lot of these social experiments. We have not had a complete life cycle yet of every generation having gone through where divorce is mainstream and common, and marriages break up with the frequency that they do in modern society. And I think we're now seeing that this isn't just a result of individual choice. It has consequences. It's interesting when you think of, the promise of individualism is that you can be whoever you want. But for me to be who I want, I need people around me. I want a we life. I want a life with others, which means that I can't just think in terms of I. I need to think in terms of we. And yet we have been keep preaching that life is all about having what you want as an individual. And I think we've missed out on emphasizing the importance of the institutions to which we belong.
I understand that the frequency of prayer also plays a vital role. Tell me more about that.
Well, prayer is, it's interesting in the sense of prayer, and, I can get theological and all the rest on that, but there is a sense in which when you are praying, you are making your needs known to God, but you're also hearing them yourself, even as you do that. And so there is something about that, I think, that process. I also think that the very act of prayer is an act of recognizing another, a transcendent, that I am not myself, but I live in relationship to others. If I see myself living in relationship to God, I'm also more likely to see myself relationship to of God's image bearers around whom I live.
Let's really dissect a person's education and their financial position and how it really impacts their loneliness, right?
Well, obviously, on the negative end, poverty does increase your likelihood to be on the negative side. Although there are lots of people who are in the lowest social economic bracket who are in the most positive side. So by no means is there a direct correlation. But obviously, financial need does, create anxieties, creates fear in terms of talking to others, creates reluctance in terms of going out. Sometimes being with other people costs. So there's a whole host of things that just very practically carry forward in terms of economics. But the irony is neither education or economics were anywhere near the same as family and faith in terms of the strength of the correlation between the two.
You live in Hamilton. I lived in Hamilton as well for many years. It has a very strong Portuguese and Italian community. And I know a lot of people in those communities. They're very interactive. They're always bringing family over, always chatting. I don't see a lot of loneliness. So do you think it's also tied in with culture, depending upon the culture we were raised in?
Absolutely. I think there is a sense in which, among immigrants, there is a sense among first-generation immigrants. They need each other. They need each other to help. A poll we did with Angus Reid Institute last year looking at immigration, found that 50% of the immigrants in Canada had received material help from a faith community. We take a look at, we brought in all these Syrian refugees last year. You take a look at the difference a year later between those who were sponsored by faith communities versus those who were government sponsored. I don't have the number at my fingertips, but I saw something the other day, and I think it was you were 5 times more likely to be employed if you were brought in by a faith community than if you were supported by the government 1 year later.
How about other minority groups? Let's talk a bit about Blacks, Asian people. Did they feel more or less isolated?
The marginalized groups, physically handicapped, LGBT, some of those groups were among those. So the groups Indigenous, those whom, if I said marginalized groups in Canada and you create the list, most of them found themselves on the more isolated side of the equation. There was a disproportionate connection there. Again, the survey did not go as far, with the survey, we're able to describe, we're not able to make correlations or say this is because of that. We simply, given the tool, we're able to make some of these linkages to say they are certainly more likely to be in those groups.
Now, the survey revealed that 62% of Canadians wish family and friends would spend much more time with them. Do you have any suggestions as how we can change our culture to facilitate spending more time together?
Well, I think there is a sense of just, plan the family reunions, the birthday parties, a lot of those things that used to be part of everyday family life that brought families together on a regular basis. Part of it is, even size of families make a difference today. I grew up in a family with 3 siblings. There were 4 of us. Today, the average is much smaller than that. So there are many less opportunities if you only have birthdays and that. So, do things together. It's good for family, but it's also good for you.
So what advice would you give to parents who are raising their children to become a little more interactive in society? So they're not so socially awkward, perhaps, as they get older.
Participate in the community. Get involved in your local Rotary Club, your local ball team. Go to the library.
Your church, right?
Your church. Volunteer. There are lots of opportunities. There are lots of needs in the world. Think about how you can help others. And when you think about how you can help others, you'll end up overcoming a lot of the challenges that you're facing yourself as well.
Maybe helping out seniors as well, volunteering at some seniors' homes?
Absolutely. Certainly, one of the big issues that the poll identified, again, in a descriptive way, is the fact that a lot of seniors are living alone. And certainly, I think we both realize the fact from just our own knowledge of seniors networks, sometimes shoveling their walks or getting their groceries or taking them to a doctor becomes an increasing challenge, especially when one spouse is gone and they're living alone. So adopt a senior on your street. Help them out. And it's amazing, I think, how much those sorts of activities can make a difference.
And think of all of the wonderful stories that seniors can share with us and the wisdom that they can impart on us as well, right?
Absolutely. No generation is isolated or has a monopoly on wisdom and insight. And in our age, when we're busy apologizing for everything previous generations did, it seems some days, I wonder whether or not we might not be wizened by listening to some of the stories, and perhaps there was a little more wisdom and context for some of the decisions than we give credit for.
Ray Pennings, the Executive Vice President of the Christian think tank Cardis, thanks a lot for joining me today from Hamilton, Ontario.
Thank you so much for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Have a great night.